This is British India, also known as the British Raj. It was a colony of the British Empire from 1850 to 1947 and consisted of modern day countries such as India, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and at one point even Afghanistan. It also consisted of Burma but was separated from this colony in 1937. But I am not here to talk about the history of the British Raj. Instead, I am here to talk about the strike led by the Royal Indian Navy. It was more than just a mere strike. Let us explore how a naval strike almost led to Indian independence. Let us first take a deep dive into the short history of naval forces in India. The first type of maritime traveling in the history of India can be traced back to the Harappan civilization. During that time, the Harappan civilization had trade links with Mesopotamia. Later on in the Vedic ages, the Rig Veda mentions that the god of oceans, Varuna, was equipped with the knowledge of which ocean routes were used. However, the first known dynasty to have a navy was the Mayura dynasty. Megasthenes, the Macedonian ambassador to Chandragupta Maurya, talked about how the army was managed. It was also a different part of the Mauryan army for fighting on water and also had a superintendent for a navy. At that time, Chanakya, the advisor and educator of Chandragupta Maurya, wrote the Arthashastra, a book about economics. It is also mentioned that the ship of the Mauryans were divided into types. The Kalingas, which is the enemy of the Mauryan dynasty, also had a navy, and not much is known about it. From then on, multiple Indian dynasties dedicated a part of their army to naval warfare. The Satavahana dynasty, which is present-day Andhra Pradesh, had a navy, and there is enough evidence actually, to prove that they spread their culture, language, and religion to other places through sea routes. It was the first dynasty where people had carved out inscriptions of ships on their coins. The Cholas too had a navy under the rule of Rajendra Chola, which explains how they were able to carry out expeditions to modern day countries such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, Timor Leste, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Lakshadweep Islands, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and parts of Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Bangladesh, and Burma. Note that some of the places I mentioned were not countries. These countries were also influenced by the Cholas, and it can be proved through the evidence in those present in those places. Angkor Wat, the largest temple in the world, is in Cambodia, built by a Khmer king named Suryavarman II during the 12th century. The navy had more than 800 ships, that is, the Chola navy of the Cholas, and some of them were used for special operations. The Gupta dynasty had a navy, just like the Kalinga navy. Not much is known about the Gupta navy, so it will not be discussed. The Vijayanagara Empire had a navy on the west coast as a part of the Vijayanagara military forces under the rule of Krishnadevaraya, the then ruler of Vijayanagara Empire. They traded through many ports in South India, especially Karnataka, and fought against the Bahamani kingdom due to a conflict between them involving the Raichur Tuap. This navy also invaded Sri Lanka. Originally, the Marathas had no navy. Later on, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj developed a naval force to combat the Mughals and built many coastal forts in cities such as Vijayadurg. According to historical records, the ships had cannons mounted on them, which was technologically advanced, at least at that time. Later on, the British East India Company emerged, which was an establishment originally formed for trading, but later on it annexed parts of Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, and Madras, which is part of present day Tamil Nadu. In those areas, the British formed a navy called the East India Company's Marine in 1682. It underwent name changes and its name was changed for the final time to the Royal Indian Navy in 1934. The garrison of the Navy was located in Mumbai. Its warships or shore establishments carried the prefix HMIS, which stood for Her Majesty's Indian Ship. The HMIS Talwar was one of those establishments, and this establishment had a signal school where Navy officers and junior Navy officers would be trained. This establishment was opened in Kolaba, Mumbai, somewhere around late 1943. Now, what is the significance of this ship, at least in this context, in this story? Well, this is where the mutiny started. The RIN was a powerful navy that the Britishers could rely on and fought alongside them in both world wars. During World War I, the navy was responsible for transporting Indian troops to different countries. The navy took part in combat during World War II and was quite small. When the war began, the Royal Indian Navy was very small and consisted of 8 ships, that is, warships only. As time progressed, the army was being mobilized, which is one of the reasons that contribute to the victory of the Allied forces, including Britain. However, after World War II, the Navy was demobilized. Why? Well, Britain was in a financial crisis after World War II, which occurred because of spending a lot of money on troops in order to defend their colonies. The infrastructure of Britain was destroyed due to an 8-month bombing campaign led by Nazi Germany known as the Blitz, which occurred on 7th September 1940. Many industrial centers and houses were damaged, and more than £110 million was spent on rebuilding. Moreover, the British government had to borrow money, mostly from USA and Canada, to finance the war. In the end, the national debt of Britain after the war was over £20 billion because, as I told you before, industrial centers were destroyed, due to which Britain could not trade with any country. Coming back to the topic, although the Royal Indian Navy was a very powerful and reliable navy, RIN naval officers were angered due to how they were treated. They were given a very low monthly salary, which was lower than 10 rupees. The barracks were overcrowded, and the soldiers of the RIN were given stale food. During the Indonesian War of Independence, which was a war fought between the Indonesians and the Dutch for independence, the British Indian troops were sent to Indonesia and were ordered to kill Indonesian freedom fighters. Some Indian troops were also sent to Egypt to defend the British garrison. After the mysterious disappearance of the leader of the Indian National Army, Subhash Chandra Bose, the INA soldiers were tried in the Red Fort and then arrested. The final and most important reason as to why this revolt started is racism or discrimination. Many British officers or government officials discriminated against the Indians, which may contribute to why they treated Indians and other Indian soldiers as well the same way, horribly. They were called vulgar names and were being insulted, such as sons of coolies, sons of bloody junglis, and the most vulgar out of all, sons of bitch, regardless of whether they were serving for the army or not. And if any one of the soldiers were against the military reforms of the British Raj, their voices would be suppressed. However, there is no record of whether they lost their jobs or not. Surely enough, just like any other normal person, they rebelled. This was the first time in the history of India, let alone the history of the entire world, that a naval force rebelled against its own country, and that too in a peaceful way. Remember when I told you at the beginning that the RIN had planned a satyagraha? Well, this is what I was referring to at the beginning. Prior to the rebellion, one of its leaders, Balai Chandra Dutt, simply known as BC Dutt, was arrested as he wrote the slogans Jai Hind and quit India on the HMIS Talwar. The plan was to strike until the British met their demands. The strike started in the HMIS Talwar on 17th February 1946. At the beginning of the strike, only the naval officers of the HMIS Talwar participated. On the following day, over 20,000 naval officers in 78 ships or shore establishments of the Royal Indian Navy started to join the strike, and in each of the ships or establishments, the naval officers replaced the Union Jack with flags of the Indian National Congress or the INC, Communist Party of India or the CPI, and the Muslim League, as to represent the unity of the people against the British, regardless of their religion. The CPI's flag was especially put because Aruna Asaf Ali, the then leader of the INC, and the members of the CPI were the only people to officially support the rebellion. The All India Radio, which is now known as Akashwani, British Broadcasting Company or BBC, the Times of India, Hindustan Standard, the Moscow Radio Broadcast, and the Herald Times were some of the organizations that reported the incident at that time. By 20th February, the rebellion spread out to Karachi, Kochi, Calcutta, Jamnagar, Mandapam, Madras, and the Andamans, where naval officers in those areas would declare strike as well. Some of the people in the HMIS Talwar formed a committee called the Naval Central Strike Committee or the NCSC for that purpose, that is, making a list of demands. One of the leaders of the strike, Lieutenant M.S. Khan, was elected president of the NCSC, and a petty officer telegraphist, Madan Singh, was elected as the vice president of the NCSC. They demanded to be paid the same as the British. They also demanded food which was not rotten. They demanded that the soldiers of the INA should be released, and finally they demanded the withdrawal of Indian troops from foreign countries such as Indonesia. In short, they demanded equal treatment as the British and the withdrawal of Indian troops in foreign lands, that is Indonesia and Egypt. The naval officers were not the only people to go against the British. Civilians were also inspired by this and protested, especially in Mumbai, where the people went on a strike with the help of a CPI and the local police in favor of the RIN. The streets of Mumbai were densely packed with many people, and they attacked many public transports, especially trains. The Royal Indian Air Force or the RIAF were ordered to shoot down the protesters. However, they too disobeyed the British's orders and joined the rebellion. In the end, 236 people were killed, at least in Mumbai, and thousands of civilians were injured. The British feared this situation as they thought that their rule over India might end and they had to leave the country. Due to this, the British cut off the water and power supply of the barracks of the RIN and threatened to destroy them. Despite the threats, the naval officers did not stop. However, on 26th February, it all changed. The Congress and the Muslim League, the majority of the Congress and the Muslim League did not support this rebellion as they thought it would go against the smooth transition of power. They thought it would be dangerous that a country will be freed by the military. Due to this, the Congress, mainly Gandhi and Nehru, sent Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel to negotiate with M.S. Khan, one of the leaders of the rebellion. He agreed and stopped the protest as they were guaranteed that they would not be persecuted. Many sailors were arrested, and 476 naval officers of the RIN were dismissed. None of them were brought back to either the Pakistani or Indian Navy. What once started as a naval strike for better treatment with little to no support from anyone escalated into a large-scale rebellion with people fighting for their freedom while supporting the country. Speaking of which, although the RIN mutiny received overwhelming support from the civilians, and Aruna Asaf Ali. It never got any political support from any party except the CPI, which may explain the quick end of this protest. Some historians also debate that between 1942 and 1945 naval revolts did occur but were somehow suppressed by the British. Therefore, we have lack of information about those. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something from this video. See.